Hello and welcome to the Dailies. Global attention remained fixed on Venezuela as Nicolás Maduro and his wife appeared briefly in a New York federal court following his capture, both pleading not guilty to drug and weapons charges. Media outlets highlighted Maduro's defiant claim as he remains Venezuela's president, describing himself as a prisoner of war. Coverage across international networks continued to track the legal proceedings, diplomatic fallout, and broader implications of the U.S. action, underscoring the case's significance for global politics, international law, and regional stability. American media continued to focus on the Venezuela story, shifting from breaking news coverage to analysis and fallout. Outlets focused on legal questions, international law, and global reaction, especially at the UN and among allies. Coverage also emphasized what comes next: oil interests, risks of instability, and whether Trump's Venezuela action sets precedent for future U.S. interventions. We'll start with Politico, which details the Trump administration's pressure on interim Venezuelan leader Delcy Rodriguez following Maduro's removal. The exclusive outlines U.S. demands, including curbing drug trafficking, expelling foreign allies, and limiting oil sales to rivals. The piece emphasizes Trump's use of threats, sanctions, and also financial leverage, while warning that Venezuela's internal rivalries and instability make the strategy risky and unpredictable. Foreign policy argues that Nicolás Maduro's capture has raised more questions than answers about Venezuela's future. The analysis asks who really holds power, why Trump acted, and what the move means for U.S. foreign policy and global rules. The piece suggests that regime largely remains in place under Delcy Rodriguez, and that oil, immigration, and also power politics, not democracy, drove the decision. It warns Trump may repeat such military actions elsewhere, creating instability and setting a dangerous international precedent. The New York Times tried to explain why President Trump declined to back Venezuelan opposition leader Maria Corina Machado after Nicolás Maduro's removal. The analysis cites U.S. intelligence and senior officials who warned Machado lacked governing capacity and risked destabilizing the country without major U.S. military involvement. The piece also highlights relations with Trump officials, which had lost or had also deteriorated amid strategic disagreements. It concludes that Trump, with his Venezuela move, prioritized oil stability over democratic transition and instead supported Maduro's vice president, exposing tensions between Washington's transactional approach and Venezuela's opposition movement. The Wall Street Journal revealed in an exclusive that President Trump privately urged U.S. oil executives to get ready weeks before Nicolás Maduro's capture. The piece shows that oil was indeed central to President Trump's Venezuela strategy, as now he wants American energy companies to rebuild Venezuela's collapsing oil industry and boost production. Some of the charts included in the piece highlight the gap between Venezuela's massive reserves and its weak output. It also underscores the caution displayed by major firms, especially Chevron, even though markets reacted positively. The piece cites political uncertainty, contract risks, and long investment timelines that could indeed complicate Trump's ambitions. The New York Post profiled Celia Flores, the wife of deposed Venezuelan leader Nicolás Maduro, portraying her as a powerful and shadowy figure inside the regime. The piece recounts how she was often called the Latin Lady Macbeth, pointing out that she was often described by former insiders as deeply involved in corruption and also drug trafficking. The piece also outlines allegations that she helped protect cartels, benefited from bribes, and placed relatives in key positions. The Washington Post analyzes America's reaction to the U.S. military operation that captured Venezuela's Nicolás Maduro based on a text message poll of 1,004 adults. Key charts show the public is indeed sharply divided. As we can see in the first chart, 40% approve of the operation, while 42% disapprove and 18% are unsure. And partisan splits are also stark, with Republicans strongly supportive and Democrats overwhelmingly opposed. Another chart finds 63% believe congressional approval was required, underscoring institutional concerns. And also, while half indeed support putting Maduro on trial for drug trafficking, majorities oppose U.S. control over Venezuela or selecting its government. And the final chart reveals a rare consensus. Here's the chart. 94% say Venezuela's future leadership should be decided by Venezuelans themselves and not by Washington. European media also remained focused on Venezuela, especially on the legality of Trump's move, with sharp criticisms dominating coverage. Major outlets emphasized international law violations, sovereignty concerns, and historical parallels to U.S. interventions, often quoting legal experts and former diplomats. There's also strong attention on regional instability and precedent, with warnings that Trump's action could weaken global norms and embolden great power force elsewhere. The Telegraph argues that President Trump's plan for Venezuela relies on indirect rule, allowing interim leader Delcy Rodriguez to govern while serving U.S. interests. The analysis warns that this strategy is indeed risky and could backfire, as Venezuela remains unstable, with powerful militias, criminal gangs, and rival figures inside the regime. It contends that if Rodriguez cannot control them or deliver U.S. demands, Washington may face pressure to intervene again. The piece concludes that removing Maduro solved little and could lead to deeper chaos. The Times examines President Trump's push to revive Venezuela's oil industry and warns the costs may be far higher than he suggests. The piece included a map that showed, here's the map. This map shows Venezuela holds the world's largest proven oil reserves, about 303 billion barrels, or about 17% of the global total. Another graph, here it is, tracks production, highlighting a steep decline from 3.4 million barrels a day in 1998 to under 1 million only in 2024. A third analysis compares costs, as you will see right now. So this is the analysis. It shows oil from Orinoco Belt is far more expensive to extract than Saudi crude. The piece explains that decades of sanctions, corruption, and also infrastructure collapse mean restoring outputs could take $100 to $200 billion and more than a decade, perhaps, making Trump's plan risky and uncertain. The Guardian explores how the U.S. capture of Nicolás Maduro has alarmed China, one of Venezuela's closest allies. The piece explains that Beijing has reaffirmed ties with Maduro just hours before the U.S. intervention. It actually highlights key data points that underline China's stakes, and also showing Venezuela has received about $106 billion in Chinese loans since the year 2000, with roughly about $10 billion still owed. The analysis also includes charts that highlight China-Latin America trade hitting a record high of $519 billion last year. A separate figure shows Venezuelan oil makes up only 4% of China's imports, suggesting that debt matters more than energy for China. The piece concludes that China fears losing money and influence if the U.S. reshapes Venezuela's leadership and oil flows. Also regarding China, The Economist argues that the US capture of Nicolás Maduro exposed the limits of China's global influence. The piece contends that despite close political ties, heavy loans and oil trade with Venezuela, China was unable to protect a key ally. It also stresses that this is not a model for Taiwan, but a warning to China's partners worldwide. The piece concludes that strong rhetoric did not translate into action, raising doubts about China's ability or even willingness to stand up to the US power beyond words. And we'll end with the Chinese media, which framed the overthrow of Maduro as illegal, imperial, and destabilizing. Chinese outlets strongly emphasized violations of international law, US unilateralism, and threats to state sovereignty, often invoking the UN Charter. Commentary also stresses China's economic exposure and strategic caution, portraying the episode as proof of US dominance. Chu Ying argues in the China Daily that the US military seizure of Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro represents a clear violation of international law and the UN Charter. She indeed rejects Washington's claim that the operation was legitimate law enforcement, warning it sets a dangerous global precedent. The author says US talk of managing Venezuela revives colonial-era intervention and threatens Latin America's non-intervention norms. The article concludes that replacing law with force risks wider instability and undermines the rules-based international order worldwide. That's it from us today. Thanks for watching the Dailies, only on Al Arabiya English.